Welcome to the Man Down Podcast. My name is Ted Knutson, and we are here to fuck up your life in the very best way. I'm joined by therapist and counselor Patrick Van Straten, and today we're going to talk about therapy. Why might you want to do therapy? What I found scary about it before, and why I was resistant to do it for a really long time, and why did both of us kind of eventually decide that, yeah, therapy is a really good idea for us, and we should do that as soon as possible. We're going to talk through all that. We're going to talk about things we found surprising about therapy, things that can go wrong in therapy, and where to find them if you're looking for them. I hope you guys enjoy it and stay tuned. For those of you who don't know, there's lore around this that goes back to our earliest episodes. And I started going to therapy, and this is actually partly the whole podcast itself is a little bit therapeutic. We were encouraged to by our listeners and our readers to start having vulnerable conversations as two successful men who have had kind of a wide experience in the world. We have children, we have been married, we have successful whatever you want to call it, whether it's businesses or careers or what have you. But then, like, I also started therapy as part of this
Mhm.
because of my journey. And Patrick himself is a therapist, and so we are lucky enough to be able to talk about this from a couple of different perspectives. Someone who came very late to therapy, me, and someone who I think you started quite a long time ago. But since this is your topic, and since I know that you have some questions for me as a newcomer, like I think it's kind of interesting to get stuck in and kick it off.
Well, and I think as well, what you've talked about in the past is also learning about this stuff independently. And I think that for a lot of people, there's a resistance to therapy. A lot of people prefer to do it independently. So I think it's kind of interesting to talk about what you can get out of therapy that you might not be able to get out of it by yourself. And also about the resistance to therapy, because I think I was always like pretty not when I was a teenager. But but after that, I think I was always pretty pro therapy, and I don't know, like I guess that I'm like a gossipy yapper with a lot of Ashkenazi blood in me, so I was just like therapy feels like
Home.
it's right where I live and breathe. But I think that like a lot of people have resistance to going to therapy, and people like to act like that resistance is childish or cowardly or something. And actually, I think a lot of the resistance is kind of reasonable and worth thinking about when you're considering going to therapy.
I resisted. I
Mhm.
I resisted for a lot of reasons. One, we can kind of go through it, but there's a question on here. So someone who's previously an autodidact in this area, what prompted me to seek out a pro? And uh, I'll talk about the resistance first, and then I'll talk about like what led me down this path that felt like I needed it. So the resistance was I'm pretty smart, and I'm very happy to read things at my own pace and to think about things at my own
Mhm.
pace. And my life is pretty complicated, or at least it had been. So when I looked at therapy, I'm like, one, I can probably do better than most therapists can on my own. And if I get the right material in front of me, if I think about things and try and solve for like frameworks. And then the other side of it is like, if I don't get the right therapist, like it might be a bunch of waste of time. It's going to take me a bunch of time to bring them up to speed. Can
Sure.
they keep up with me? Is like a big question as well. And I was concerned about that. I didn't want somebody just sort of asking me gentle questions. I wanted somebody to like, help me move along in my journey through life. And I just felt like that was going to be a real struggle for me.
Mm. Okay. So there's an interesting resistance there, which I wonder if it still comes up in your therapy. Like I guess I'm intrigued about that. When you were learning though by yourself, were you coming up against stuff that you thought I actually do need help to figure this out, or because I guess I would argue that like intelligence is great and it is very useful and you can learn stuff, but obviously what you would hope therapy can sometimes bring about is wisdom, which is like different from smarts, I suppose.
Sure. I literally told my therapist a couple weeks ago, I'm probably wiser and sadder than I've
Mm.
been in a very long time. So yes, I agree with the wisdom part of it, but if you find the wrong therapist, and I can say this actually from experience, if you find the wrong therapist, like it just feels like a challenge and an irritant. And that is not what I wanted.
Mm.
I did not want somebody who also like I'm an American in the UK. And so there actually is a pretty big cultural gap. And if I had to explain that cultural gap all the time and somebody else is like, "Ooh, I'm not sure about that." But yeah, so I was like there were all these elements that I was concerned about and I started out when you do go to therapy, you should often try out a couple of them. Like talk to them, see how you get a vibe or not. And I did try a couple for like 2, 3 sessions and found one that I think is amazing and one that I was like, "Ooh, I don't like how we talk to each other." Like we had in
Okay.
3 sessions, we had moments inside of those sessions where I was like, I don't like where you're coming from. Or she just subscribed to theories that I thought were like fucking nonsense, which I which can happen as well.
Yeah, I get that.
So that was my initial resistance and my initial, yeah, a little bit of my experience. And it wasn't the it was unfounded. I think that those were somewhat legitimate concerns. But I love therapy right now. And it's because it's helping me in ways that I'm having more vulnerable conversations than I have. I don't have necessarily a space to have these vulnerable conversations. I probably never did have like a great space to have these conversations before, but I didn't realize the absence of it. So, for those of you who are joining us in recent episodes, I do want to go through a little bit of lore because it's actually a good check in. So, what happened to me is I had a breakdown at the end of last year, so in autumn of last year, and it caused me to break up with a partner that I thought that I was going to move in with and that we were going to potentially spend a very long portion or the rest of our lives with. And I thought when I did the breakup that I was like, oh, or I never mind. I didn't think I created reasons for this breakup with her. But what actually happened was that I had basically a catastrophic stealth breakdown caused by overload of stress from dealing with a startup for 8 years and the breakdown of friendships inside of that startup and dealing with tens of millions of pounds of people's money and all of the things that came with that. And people basically yelling at me for the last 2 years of my business. And at some point, I was like, I feel like whatever I do isn't good enough. No one's happy with me. And what's the fucking point? So I jettisoned all forms of stress and all sources of stress. And I basically like existed on autopilot for about 3 months. Like I mostly just saw my kids and I started dating people just to like have dates and spend time because I thought that, oh yes, I'm out of this relationship and now I can like explore again. It's so great. But the reality was like I was just looking for distractions and I was broken, like horribly broken in a way that I've never felt broken before, but I didn't know it. So I disguised all of that for a few months. Then I came back out in Christmas time and I was like, ooh, I feel like even though I always treated this person with gentleness, but I did have like a very complete break with them. I feel like I owe them an apology. And then I was like, why do I owe them an apology? It's like, oh, I don't just owe them an apology. Like, I really appreciate them. Oh, fuck. I love them.
Mm,
Oh, fuck. I have been in love with them the entire time. I still love them. In fact, my feelings during this period of time for this person have never wavered.
mhm, mhm,
When I hit that, I was like, what the actual fuck happened? Because this is all me looking backwards. I'm like, how can I still be in love with this person when I felt this overwhelming need to break up with them? And I started writing about it and I started journaling about it, partly
mhm,
because I couldn't talk to her because she didn't want to talk to me because she was very angry at me for very smart, intelligent reasons. And I get it. So, as part of the journaling process, part of the writing process, I hit a few different spots and a few different topics where I was like, huh, I didn't know that I felt that way, or I need to dig into this. And effectively, something so catastrophic that it caused me to self sabotage in this way, and also having talked to you a little bit about it too, made me realize that I really needed to talk to somebody professionally because I
mhm,
didn't understand what happened.
mhm,
And I hit a spot where I was like, this is so baffling to me, and this level of mess about myself, I don't think that I've ever had before. So I really do need to like self-examine, but also to talk to somebody on how to deal with all of this from the stress related part, because I never want it to happen again. I need to understand how to build these, check-ins with myself and these processes to find out, when am I feeling wobbly or not. And the other part is like I don't think I've ever had like a horrible breakup, and then it's all my fault as well. So I have to deal with all the
mm,
guilt from that, and
sure.
and obviously breaking her heart too. And so it was this overwhelming amount of stuff that I was like, man, I'm properly fucked. I need to talk to somebody professional about this because like this may take ages.
So you needed a kind of receptacle for this stuff, and there was a journal, and the journal did for a bit. But then it sounds like as well that the understanding that you needed someone to help sift through it, but also maybe that there could be something healing about the interpersonal connection. I think in there because when you're dealing with guilt, the more time you spend with yourself, very often, the worse you feel. Whereas you're with somebody else and you explain it to somebody else, and somebody says, Well, like when you describe it to me now, I think, well, Ted, this is maybe maladaptive, but it is adaptive. Like you were trying to meet a short-term need at the cost of a long-term, desire, but it's not irrational. Like you can understand the mindset that said, especially you as a gambler, that kind of at a certain point maybe said, this is an unwinnable game. I need to take my chips and walk away.
Oh my god, that is exactly where my brain went, and in fact, in some cases, my brain went a little further. This is an unwilling winnable game. I don't know how to survive this. Like,
Sure, sure.
I don't know how to continue like this, and when I later wrote back to the person that I broke up with, I was like, look, this was not personal towards you. This was survival towards me. And I know it doesn't feel that way. And I'm so sorry for it. And you still have to claim all of it. It's still my responsibility. I still fucked it. It's not her fault. Like there might have been things that she could be able to do either like in the process afterwards or even now. But like again, that's about her survival and her mental health and
Hmm.
whatever. Um, and it's just it's heartbreaking. And so now that I've been through a lot of that, like when people go through a breakup, and this is like a slightly different thing, but like, people often say women have a different time period that they take, but we do this podcast mostly for men. Men, it also often takes you about the same time. You just don't realize when it starts.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
for men, like we often become hyper avoidant, become independent, we take big steps away, and then we're like, oh, we're fine. And I'm gonna lift more and I'm gonna hang out with my bros more and I'm gonna meet new women, I'm gonna sleep with people and do whatever, right? Like
Hmm.
all the things that men often do. And then you find a few months down the line that feels like someone's punching you emotionally in the face over and over again. And it's
Yeah.
you. It's
Hmm.
you that's punching you in the face. But you have a delayed reaction to it. And this is why women have such a strong reaction too. It's like, oh my God, he's just back out there. I can't believe that he's not like hurting from this or that he's not feeling it. Like in many cases, either we're feeling it or we've had the delayed reaction until we don't feel it until later. And
Hmm.
then you're like, what the fuck happened here? Because it's not directly connected. It's like something broke your leg and you
Hmm.
walked on it for another 2 months. And then suddenly you're like, my leg is in significant pain. What's going on?
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. Yeah. There's the idea that you might be trying to distract yourself. You might literally not know. I think we've all been through those breakups or those situations where you're like, I'm fine with this. I had this with a breakup, when I was young. This was like the big relationship I had before my wife. And I remember she was like a mess. We would still see each other. Like we were still respected each other, but she was a mess and I was totally fine. And then, like, best part of a year later, she's in another relationship. She's fine. And I was a fucking disaster. And I was probably a disaster for like 2 years after this because I was
Yeah.
just trying to push it down. Similar thing happened when my wife had a miscarriage between our two children. Like, obviously, you're having very different experiences anyway. Um, but for her, it was all like raw and being processed on the surface, and I think as well, is like a more bodily grief, right? So it was like forcing itself into her thoughts. It was like intruding on her normal life, and I didn't take any time off work, didn't stop and think about it, and it was only like months and months later that I realized that every time this topic got close to coming up, I would feel this like absolutely unbearable wave of emotion about it. And it's been like that, over the last couple of years, even though we then were lucky enough to like have a healthy child afterwards, which is a kind of healing, but like it still takes me by surprise now because at the time I was just like my job's to kind of like support my wife, which I think I also did in quite a like detached way, quite a removed way. My job is to support my wife and just like keep moving forward. And what will solve this is like having another baby. And then I found out like, oh shit, like this bullet was fired, however many months ago, and now I'm bleeding out. Like
Yeah.
what's going on?
And it becomes this impossible situation where like even if you're really thoughtful about it, like you still have to deal with it at some point. And in some cases you are fine. That's the thing. Like sometimes you're like, actually, I don't really like this person that I'm with. It's taken me some time to get to the point where like I need to make a separation. It's not that big a deal. But like the stealth thing is like, oh. I thought that that was the right choice, but it actually was a horrible choice for everyone. And now I've fucked things up. And how do I
Mm,
either repair that, which may not be possible, which is horrible, or how do I continue on with my life, which also is a big struggle because like I'm going to think about this a lot. So that's kind of the lore of like how even this podcast started, but also like how I ended up in therapy. And, the breakup happened 9 months ago. I'm still in therapy, and I'm probably gonna be in therapy for a long time. Now, there are times where, like, you feel like you need therapy for a while because you need to help handle a thing. But what I wanted to bring to this podcast for people is sometimes you need to do, like, a diagnostic about yourself, and not about your health, but about your life and how you walk through it, and your emotional life especially. And signs that you might want to be in therapy are pretty extensive. But, if you're constantly highly emotional about things, if you're constantly sad or you feel like life is really, really tough, you can, if you've got a great friend group, like that's a good place to go. If you've got like really good mom and sister or brother relationships, sometimes your dad too. Those are good places to go to. But if you feel overwhelmed a lot, like you might want to talk to somebody. The inverse is also true, and this is more crucial for guys, especially because we tend to be, like, slightly on the avoidant side. If you don't feel like you have the full range of emotional feelings,
mm,
that's an interesting sign for you that you
yeah.
should pay attention to, and
Mm,
many, many guys have this. You suppress. Some women have it too. This was the case for me. And, now I'm like, I watched the most recent season of The Bear and I cried 3 times and I was like, "Fuck, I've never done that before." And then I had to ask some people who liked the show. I was like, "Has it always been this emotional for people?" She's like, "Yeah, I cry like, 3, 4 times a season." I was like, "Okay, it's me. That's fine. This is a healing thing." So like checking in on your life, and I'm sure that you have some more examples of times that maybe you should go talk to somebody.
mhm. I really like that idea of it as a diagnostic because you don't want to wait to run like your antivirus software till like
Until you're filled
till
with
your laptop is like overheating and gonna fucking explode, like you kind of want to do it periodically. And actually, yeah, like if you feel good, I mean, I guess, look, you could argue here that I'm saying if you feel shit, go to therapy. If you feel great, go to therapy. But often when you feel good, like this is a time when you have a bit more bandwidth to explore some of the deeper stuff. Like often if somebody comes into therapy and they feel pretty good, then we can say, okay, well, maybe that gives us a bit more room to go for the stuff that at other times feels overwhelming. I mean, for me, I always felt like I was in touch with my emotions. I would talk about my emotions very happily. I wasn't concerned about that stuff. But in reality, I think I was not in touch with a lot of the really unpleasant ones. I did feel shame and guilt and stuff, but everything was getting turned into anger for me. And my anger was also becoming, well, I don't know if it was becoming, but it had always been a bit of a problem. And I was like, I'm in my mid 20s now. This isn't fucking cute anymore. Like I'd always been known to have a temper since I was like 1. But yeah, I was kind of like, this isn't cute. This is a problem. And I don't really want to walk around being angry. And also at that point I was like 26, 27, and I was getting married, and my wife and I were talking about, when we were going to have kids. And I was like, I'm not happy enough and I'm not together enough to be a dad. So I need to go and like work on this shit. Plus I was very aware that I was just hurting my wife,
Mm.
you know. Like she was getting far more of this than anybody else. Other people were getting it too, but she was the person who least deserved it and was like seeing the majority of it. So I thought this is unworkable and I don't want to be this person because I feel like I'm a prick.
So when I look back, I understood anger quite well. And
Hmm.
I was able to actually work through anger pretty well because I realized these are choices and being angry doesn't help me in almost any circumstance in like business. Like you can get angry sort of after the fact, but like feeling it in the moment, like
Yeah.
that's different. That's bad. Right. So it's very much about what game are you playing there and how do I achieve my goals? And like learning to suppress or divert your emotions on those is a big deal. I learned to do lots of exercise in order to take the emotional edge off so that that made me easier to handle these things. So I kind of knew happiness and success and anger, but I did not know sadness. I really don't know grief. You know, guilt is something I probably don't have a lot of. I didn't grow up with it. And like I'm but also like I won't beat the shit out of myself for things that I know that I deserve. So like
Mm.
that, there's that. So nowadays, coming into the modern space of me, like 6 months down the road after starting therapy, I feel like I kind of understand the warning signs and what happened before around the stress related breakdown. And I feel like I've got lots of check ins there. And you and I talked about being more emotionally vulnerable and just vulnerable in general. And I think that I very much accept that. And I tended toward that before, but then I had to suppress a bunch of it as CEO. So then the question is like, why would you still stay in therapy? And there's so many reasons there. And I keep talking about it. So like, I didn't realize that my childhood was like much more bumpy and challenging than I thought it was. I just packaged it up as, oh, you had like a normal childhood. And then it was like, oh, you had a sister that was handicapped and you helped raise them. And there's a big gap there. And you had a dad that was an alcoholic that didn't show up when you were 5. And
Mhm.
continued to have a super fractious relationship and actually turns out to be a narcissist. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's a lot. Okay. I feel
Mhm.
fine about all that, like because like I feel like I understood it, but like the understanding process was a big deal.
Mhm.
And then there's this bit of me that is around this relationship that ended. And as you say, like you don't know when the grief button is going to get pressed and like suddenly you're overwhelmed by these feelings. So this month would have been kind of 2 years, and also that person's birthday is this month. And like I feel like I might walk through life just being a tiny bit sad for the rest of my life because of this thing. And I don't know
Mhm.
how to handle that. Um, I think I'm in probably the acceptance stage of grief around it, which I don't know how long that lasts. It could last a very long time. I think the other thing that I really don't understand right now is how to make myself emotionally available for the next relationship. And this
Mhm.
is something that like I don't know if it's teachable, but I want to talk to somebody about this weekly if it's something that's in my mind. I want to be able to talk to my kids about these things in the future to like be a good sounding board and to because I've now experienced the emotion, I'm not just giving them, the knowledge that I read in the book, but like I'm here. I want to continue to experience the breadth of emotions. And I also want to find a way, and you'll hear this repeated, like I want to find a way to continue to be gentle and strong at the same time while walking through life. And this is towards my friends, this is towards my family, this is towards people that I love or I have loved in the past or that I want to love in the future. I think all these things are tough because like life is going to fucking punch you all the time and throw you off of that. And I think that having a support pillar in my life like a therapist that can say things so simple as that's normal.
Mm.
You're feeling there, that's totally normal. Like your experience here, you didn't do anything wrong, or the other person is reacting in a way that, you might want to look at like this. I like, fuck, I don't have that anywhere else. And there's so much value in that to me. So that's why, even though I feel like from the breakdown, I kind of understand it. Everything else since then, I'm a little bit lost and I need help.
Mhm. And what you're talking about there, those I want statements, that's really the stuff that for people here who haven't been to therapy, those are the things that you might want to think about before you consider going. It doesn't need to be like super clean. Like your therapist can help you figure out what it is. But if there's something that you want and you feel like you need a little bit of help to get it, then therapy is a good place to go looking for it. And you don't have to stay in therapy forever, but as long as you want something and you feel like therapy is helping you on the path towards it, you can stay in. Often when clients come to therapy, I will say to them, I do like a preliminary call with them. So we'll talk for like 20 minutes, half an hour, just like a free chat, like talk about what's bringing you to therapy, why now, what do you want to get out of it, what's your experience of therapy before, all that kind of stuff. And there I'll normally say, do you have an idea of how long you want to do this for? Because some people say, I want like 3 months
Yeah.
and then we'll reassess. Or I haven't done this before, so can we do a few sessions and then we'll, talk about how it's working. And I normally try and do that with new clients as well, just because as you were talking about before, well, actually, it sounds like your issue with the other therapist was much more fundamental. But sometimes with a client as well, you speak the same emotional language, and it's super easy from day one. You can use metaphors even when they're a little bit clunky or poorly put, and the client will get you. And other clients, you can think, I am delivering incredibly clear, like crystalline, like insight here, and it just doesn't work for you because I'm not speaking your language, and that kind of stuff makes it that kind of stuff is it's a longer road to understanding one another.
Yeah, I've had relationship partners that same way too, where I'm like, look,
Hmm.
the words that I'm saying are exactly what I mean. I don't mean anything like above and beyond that. Like, please don't reinterpret them because like I'm quite explicit in how I say things and nuanced and gentle. Uh, and so if you run three steps and you think that I meant this thing that is like much more harsh and serious towards you, and I didn't say that at all, like you're just like, ooh, I don't know how to cut through that. That's like really challenging for me. I don't know how to make myself be understood. And if we can't do that, then like we're going to struggle together.
That's a much more polite version of the one I have. I don't say this in therapy, but I say, no, I meant what I said. And the way that you can tell that I didn't mean the thing that you think I wanted to say is that I didn't say it.
I didn't
You
say
know,
it.
yeah. Or you know how you can work out what I mean by listening to what I fucking say. Like that's the thing that I find myself saying to people quite a bit. So I don't know, like so your resistance to therapy, I would quite like to come back to that in a bit because you obviously selected to try and avoid some of these things that you thought might be issues. But I also think that sometimes the things you expect to be issues just turn out not to be, right? There's a lot of conversation about therapy inevitably now. There's a lot of therapy speak that's kind of oozed out into
the
normal conversation.
the prevalence of therapy speak that is
It's bad.
non-specific is very troubling and it causes issues.
Well, and people come into therapy and they start talking this way, and I kind of am like, this is bullshit, man. Like we need to get through this to get to the point. The overuse of a word like toxic, and I'll say like toxic to me is really fucking strong. Like like if
Yeah.
you came in and said this person is radioactive and I can't be around them, I'd be like, that's very extreme. And
Trauma is also extreme. And
well, yeah,
you
sure.
need to be careful about the usage of that word because variations of that word and lesser versions of that are probably more where you're at, but there are some cases where it is trauma and traumatic, and you need to dig into that too. But yeah, anyway, the you're right, the prevalence of these phrases that people don't fully understand.
Well, we hate it too. It's not that helpful. And yeah, you'll find yourself talking to people and they'll be throwing all this stuff around. It's kind of like the way that if you go on Instagram, everyone's talking about like the male gaze and the female gaze. And I think
Mhm.
none of this is what you think you're talking about here. I don't think. But I do think that some of it, I can understand the grounds of it. So there are people who will say, oh, well, I went to see a therapist, but all they did was tell me that it's the people around me and I'm totally fine. Like, yeah, I don't think that's great.
Oh my god,
Or the
that
other way
that's
around, right? That would
that's
be
the
bad.
That's a recent Instagram thing where like guys are pushing back on the girl thing where the girl's best friends will just be like, "Oh, you're perfect. Nothing is wrong with you. It's all his fault." And and like the secret thing is like, "Oh yeah, if we just put her back in the dating pool and tell her that she's perfect, that's great for us because we get to take the better men." Like it's this really weird
Well, like,
involved
yeah,
thing.
you've still got tread on your tires. Like, go back out there. Like, let's see what happens. Yeah, I mean, so the idea is that this is like intrasexual competition. Is that the idea?
Yeah, yeah, and but, like, what you just said is exactly the thing. It's not your fault, it's everyone around you. It's like, "Well, sometimes, but
And
quite possibly."
my therapist said to me really early on, she was just like, some of this stuff is like on you, some of it's on other people, but
Mhm,
you're the one here, and
right.
you only have power to change how you behave.
So that's
So
the most important bit.
you got to do
What do
something
you
about it.
have power over, right?
Hmm.
And these relationships with other people, you can only handle your side of it. You can only handle the conversations that you have with them, but you can't make them choose other things. And so when you've had a breakup and you want that person back, you can be very vulnerable and tell them the value that you see in them, and you can talk to them about the mistakes that you've made, and you can be like, hey, this is what I would like to have with you in the future. You can be these wonderful clear communications.
Mm.
Don't expect anything back because you don't know. And that's like the expectations is like what really causes the problems there. But it's the same way with your friends. It's the same way with your parents. If you have very fractious relationships with your parents that you find can be consistently challenging, that might be a useful thing to go to therapy because those people are, but also at some point you own your own shit too. And that's sort of what your therapist was telling you. You're the one that's in here. You're the one that has control. You own your own shit from whatever your parents did to you over time and how you handle going forward in the future. And that's what all this is about. You can talk about the past, but the trick is, what are we going to do in the future? How does that change your behavior? How does that change who you spend time with? How does that change who you love and value?
Yeah, or even just like what you say to yourself. Like, okay, if you've been blaming yourself about this for a long time, then you can say to yourself, I was a kid. I was a kid and I was doing my best. Or even my parents were kids and they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Like
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff, like this is all just like useful reassessment of something. Like you get to see an event in your past from a different perspective. But I am kind of addicted to like Reddit threads and things about where people complain about therapy, because half the time I'm like, wow, this therapist should go to prison. And half the time I'm like, I'm sorry to say this, but like with all the love in my heart, you're a fucking idiot and you don't understand how therapy works. Because it'll be, oh, my therapist doesn't really give me good advice. It's like, yeah, therapy's not about advice. Or I was depressed and my therapist told me to go for a walk. Yeah, that's actually pretty good advice. Like
You
they're
should
not,
walk and think about things like every day if you
and they're
can.
also
Like,
not saying that you're going to cure your therapy with walking, you'll cure your depression with walking. But do you know one thing that we know works from multiple studies, like with depression, is physical activity and trying to promote endorphins and like being connected to your body. And also, even just the, I went for a walk today, I achieved something, like that kind of stuff as well, which is, as anybody who's listening who's been depressed will tell you, like getting out of bed, making yourself lunch, changing your sheets or something, like going for a run when you are depressed, that is absolutely the most you can hope for, and it's fucking good to enjoy it. I always end up reading these things and half the time I'm just like, well, yes, your therapist shouldn't try to have sex with you. That should never happen under any circumstances. But also, if your
and as a
therapist said a thing
patient,
you
you
didn't
shouldn't try and
like,
have sex with them either. It's not like, there's
it's
just both
more
sides of
forgivable though.
responsibility. Oh,
More
fuck off.
forgivable. But no, because it's like at least then something is going on therapeutically. So like, yes, the client shouldn't do that, but if the client does that, then as the therapist you can say, okay, well, what's going on here? Because quite often then you might say, okay, well, what is it about me? What do you know about me that's producing this attraction? Uh,
Are you
because
attracted because you're having a vulnerable conversation with somebody? Like,
because
that's
I'm interested in you, because I'm listening to you. You don't know anything about me. What you know is that I turn up every week, I'm reliable, and I'm interested, and I care.
yeah.
Like, so where are we getting there? Like, or if you're obviously if you're there's an age disparity or something else going on there that might be visible, then that's kind of interesting and useful as well. But I do think that when people are approaching therapy, like they do need to. It's interesting for you to say the client has a responsibility not to try and fuck their therapist, because I do think that one area we could maybe improve when people are considering therapy is letting clients know that they have responsibilities too, because the therapist has ethical undertakings and all this kind of stuff, but when you're a client you do need to turn up and try not to be defensive.
Yeah.
So I had an example from this when I was looking at like bad therapy. I was reading it because I love it, and it makes me feel like a better therapist. I found this thing on Reddit, and I'm using this because it's a really contentious example. But somebody said, I was 39. I had unearthed my wife's affair only a week previously. Was just a total heartbroken, shattered mess. His, the therapist's, recovery plan was to make a man out of me, Mulan style, and that video games were for children. He was well into his 70s, fired, since remarried. I still play the video games. So, just as an example here, I think this therapist is likely a fucking idiot. I think this therapist obviously said what they said without like much care, or they said it in a way that the client couldn't hear, or they tried to go too quickly, or whatever. I'm not defending this therapist, but I do want to play devil's advocate and say, is there value in what was said here? So, if you spoke to your wife about why this affair happened, did you get any information? What was going on in the relationship before? This is the sort of stuff that you would want to think about. So what I'm trying to show here is that somebody could ask something that seems very aggressive and kind of unpleasant, but actually as a client you do at least want to try and take it seriously as a question. So maybe you go off and play video games, like rather than helping your wife run the house, rather than helping your wife parent. Maybe you lost your job and all you want to do is play video games all day. Maybe she's being unreasonable, but maybe it was a bit of a coping strategy for you. Maybe it was childish. Maybe there was a time when you were growing up where you were told you needed to grow up. You were told you needed to take more responsibility and you just stayed in your room and played video games. So is this kind of stuff going on? Like the therapist is probably an idiot, probably old fashioned, but I know a lot of people since I became a therapist, a lot of people have told me about their bad experiences of therapy, and they're good. But quite often, they've told me, "Oh, a therapist asked me this question, and I was really offended by it." And I have said to a couple of them, "I think your therapist was kind of on the money. I think your therapist was maybe right about that because you are going to have to be challenged. You are going to have to accept that your therapist is going to push you into places that you are scared of going. Now, if you're not ready to
This
go
is that
there,
diagnostic.
you have that ability.
This is
Go
that
on.
diagnostic that we talked about. You need to understand, like, when you get uncomfortable about something, why am I uncomfortable about this? I need to
Yes,
dig
yes,
into it.
exactly. Hmm.
And in your life, like when you're uncomfortable about something, like why did I have that reaction? We talked about the anger thing as well. When you're taking things out on your spouse or your friends that you couldn't handle earlier in the day, and so it rolls all the way downhill until you find somebody that you can sort of unleash on. Like, why
Yeah.
am I doing this? Because I'm not actually mad at my wife. I'm mad at this thing that happened earlier in the day. If I'm uncomfortable with stuff that my therapist is asking, why? How do I get more comfortable with it? We should dig in. We should think about it. I need to take walks and think about it. Self diagnostic and understanding when you get uncomfortable about stuff is going to be the whole key to unlocking so many things in your life that are going to make you better and healthier.
And a situation that you're talking about, for example, you were an extremist, before when you had the breakdown, and then you were like, "I can't be in this relationship. I need to take this concern off the table." But if a client came in and they were talking about something like that, if I felt like they'd be receptive to it, I potentially might say to them, "You need to understand that there are going to be times that this is really going to be uncomfortable for you too. And in those moments, you may want to leave therapy because this is a pattern that you might have established as a way of protecting yourself." Now, I'm not saying you're not allowed to leave therapy. I can't force anybody to do anything, but I just want you to pause if you start getting that drive to leave when we're right in the middle of something, and ask yourself, do I want to leave because it's time to leave therapy and because I've met my goals? Do I want to leave because I don't like this therapist and I think somebody else would help? Or do I want to leave because I'm uncomfortable and I just can't hack it anymore? Because if it's the last one, that is the moment to really lean in. That's the moment to show up even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we talked about kind of my behavior and when I went avoidant and being more vulnerable, like we just
Mm,
keep coming back, keep talking about it, keep working through it. Um, and how do you want to handle yourself and your life in the future? Like that's the whole thing about all this stuff. You are here right now, and you
hmm
get to make lots of choices about your future. And you have to think about like who is that person that I want to be? What things do I want to achieve in the future? And to some extent, what am I comfortable with in my emotional environment that, either I'm uncomfortable with now or I lost or that I want to get to, right? These are all great questions for you that almost nobody really asks. Like we just kind of live
hmm
our life. When you start
Sure.
asking these questions, sometimes you uncover shit that's really uncomfortable. Sometimes you uncover people that you're like, oh, this is one of the sources of my consistent issues
Yeah.
that I'm uncomfortable with.
hmm But I like this though,
It's
because
true.
what you're driving at here though is that these are questions you're posing yourself. And again, I think part of the issue with how people approach therapy is they think it's like another sort of medicine. You know, they're like, I go to see the doctor, doctor does a blood test, doctor says, "Oh, you've got avoidant attachment." Then they prescribe me a course of, 6 sessions of talking about my mum. Like, it's like, that's not how it works. We can't give you a pill that makes you securely attached. You are going to have to do a process of self discovery. And the therapist is there much more as a mirror than as a doctor who just tells you what's wrong with you. And you also wouldn't want that, right? Especially if you are like if you're like a straight white cis man, then maybe that'll work for you if you get a straight white cis male therapist. But if there's anything going on in your life like which is specific to you, like culture, race, gender, sexuality, all this kind of stuff, and let's be honest, everybody's life is specific to them, then somebody just telling you how things should be and how your life should be lived, it's very, very unlikely to mesh with your idea of what the good life is. Like a good therapist will work with you to understand what you think a better life would look like, not just kind of force it on you and say, well, the important thing is, that you're still productive at work, or the important thing is that you stay in marriage because marriage is good and we shouldn't have divorce, like things like that. You don't want the therapist imposing their ideas on you. You want the therapist to to co-create an idea of success that then that feels like you, that feels like something you actually want to work towards.
One of the things that I was surprised by in therapy is, we'll talk about things that I think are wrong with me, but sometimes my therapist will tell me things that are good about me that
Hmm.
I was like, I still we've this is a recurring theme. I've been surprised by it, and I'm not entirely sure that I can accept it, even when I've already told myself that this is true.
Mm.
And I think it's just because like it's sort of unusual in my life. And as a CEO, it is one of the loneliest jobs in the world. It is so isolated because like you at all times have to be pushing people in a certain direction, and you have to explain to people, and sometimes you have to be hard, and you can't be like you can't even be people's real friends. I've had this where like I've run, large departments, and I thought that I was hiring friends, and like it just didn't happen anymore. They weren't friends because they were employees, and there was always that factor of distance. And then you did it with a company and it was the same thing again. So having someone in my life that isn't like my mom or my partner be like, "Oh, this is a really good thing about you and you should appreciate that. You should be proud about that." They do that. And
Mm.
they have context behind it. And they're like, and sometimes you're like, "Oh, I know you found this really challenging like 3 months ago, but it's great to see you succeeding in this way, at least from what you're telling
Yeah.
me."
Yeah, it's so much easier to do that as the therapist. Like clients come in and they tell me shit, and I say to them like, "You do realize that this was like a goal that you had, or you do realize that when we talked last year, you were like, I could never say that to my sister, and
Yeah.
now you just ring your sister up and you're like, you're being an asshole about X or Y." And I think, oh my god, so it really is like that. People are endlessly surprising. But seeing as you said this, what else surprised you about therapy?
I think that a bit like I alluded to earlier, like some of these things that we talk about, hey, men, you might want to be aware of this, are that you and I have both experienced in our lives before. So starting to be able to feel things like for real. So there was a period of time where when I realized that I was still in love with my ex and I fucked it all up and I thought that I did it for reasons that I was on fire. Like I felt everything all the time. It felt like every nerve ending was on the outside of my body and exposed. And I didn't know how to regulate that. And that never really happened to me before. Then there was a period of time where like you then are exhausted by it all and you go into sort of emotional shutdown and like you barely experience anything, which is sort of where I was before too. So like I had like one brief period that was overwhelmingly bad and then like two long stints of emotional zeros. And now I'm very much trying to be present and experience stuff and realize what the emotions are like and let them, a bit like the force, like let it flow through me and not
Hmm.
suppress it. Because I think that I'm convinced that there's a much healthier way to do it. It's the way that other people experience things. And some days I'm like, oh wow, today's like a really emotional day for reasons that I understand or reasons that I don't understand. And
Hmm.
so like in some cases I don't want to have the emotions here, but I can wait until later and kind of process all of it. Or in some cases I'm like, I'm just going to be emotional today and I'm not going to be angry or upset, but I'm going to just accept it and explain to people that hey, I'm weirdly emotional today and don't take this as anything's wrong. It's just one of those days that I'm kind of experiencing other things in life and hey, it's
Mm.
a little weird time in life to have that happen, but she's really helped me with that and she's encouraged me with that
Mm.
because I think that that's important and that's also a key in not falling back into those old patterns that in some cases served me really well because they were superpowers. Like you can suppress emotions and continue to handle things in very large ways. But in other cases, like the bill comes due and you collapse your whole life.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think I had similar, I guess, revelations, that or something, for example, this idea that I thought, well, I'm comfortable with emotion because I'm comfortable talking about emotion. And then I
Hmm.
realized that in our therapy sessions, I was all in this very cerebral kind of space where we were talking about emotions kind of abstractly. And then my therapist would say, well, what are you feeling right now? And I was just like, what do you mean? What am I feeling right now? I'm just
Yeah.
talking about an idea. Like this is my most comfortable space. And she was like, no, 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 no. Like, what are you feeling when you talk about this thing in your life? And I slowly realized that I was pushing all this to the side, shutting it down, even as somebody who thought of myself as like much more comfortable with emotion. Then there's just the mechanical stuff. Like when I first started going to therapy, I was just like, I thought it was an hour, starts on the hour, ends on the hour. I didn't realize it was 50 minutes. I thought they'd sit there and like, I didn't know if I'd have to lie down. I thought they'd take notes while I was in there, and I didn't really want that because I think that's rude. they didn't do that, and I would never do that. I mean, some therapists do that, and if you do, then like God bless, but I would never do it. Even those sorts of things, because sometimes like I try and say this to people who are really new to therapy. It's like it's okay to ask these questions. Like if your experience of therapy is from like a Woody Allen film or The Sopranos, like it's all right to say like, how does this work? Do I have to lie down? Like, do I take my shoes off if I do lie down? You know, that kind of thing. All that mechanical side of it, I think, is another thing that gets people in their heads. That again, they feel like it's like showing up to the doctor, and it's a little bit like going to the headmaster's office. I've got to be there for a good reason. I've got to show that I'm worth their time. Otherwise, I'll get in
You
trouble. You know,
know,
that kind of thing.
one that took me by surprise that was really quite unexpected to me. It is one of the first times that someone has asked me, "Okay, where do you come into this? Like, what is your actual feeling? What are you getting out of this?" Like, not
Hmm.
from the therapy thing, but so many times in my life, because she'll hear me describe situations and like how I'm thinking about other people or caring about other people, or this is what I'm looking at. And what I didn't realize was that I've spent so much of my time building other stuff or being concerned about the health and well-being of the company that I was in or the team that I was working for or my family and my partner that I had really submerged a lot of me in that. And so now she quite explicitly asks me because I'm trying to still learn this because I still don't know how to do it. How do you feel about this? Where are you coming into this? What is your actual like
Mm.
opinion on this thing that's going through? Not like how are you taking care of somebody else? Like, how are you taking care of you? And then
Hmm.
and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I don't really know that I know how to do that very well."
Mm.
What an
So,
absurd fucking thing to say.
well, yeah. I mean, you get into that zone sometimes, don't you, where you're kind of like, well, what I am is my functions for other people. Like that's what makes me up. And then you need your therapist to say, like, but that's not, that's not true. Like you do need that other voice who says, like, this sounds well, maybe they wouldn't say this sounds crazy, but kind of sounds crazy that you're not thinking about yourself here, at least a little bit.
Yeah, and, I think that I'm continually surprised by how dumb I am because, like, I
That
really
is
am.
nice. Isn't that nice? I agree. I agree with that. And actually, this goes back to something you were saying before when you were like, I need this. I need a therapist who can keep up with me. And I think all that kind of stuff is true. I find very often with friends of mine who are thinking about therapy and with prospective clients that they will say, I need somebody really smart. I need somebody really, really, really smart. That is what I need. And I kind of say to them, like, yes, okay, you need somebody who's not stupid. But like this idea that they need to be super smart, I do think is still based in this idea that like they're gonna diagnose me and tell me what's wrong.
They're what we expect from US doctor shows.
Yes, exactly. You're like, okay, this will be like house but nice. That's kind of the vibe. And so I will say to clients, I'll say, well, look, like I'm a person and I'm going to do my best to understand you. And I think I have something to offer, or I wouldn't be here like charging for this. But there are going to be loads of times where I say things that you don't agree with. There are going to be times that I don't get what you're talking about. And I'll be honest with you, and you're going to have to help me through it. But like, just being like smart isn't really the sole thing here. You want somebody to really like look at you and hear what you're saying and take you seriously and try and understand things through your eyes. Like those things are more important. And so I had the same thing when I'm not, I think my therapist is smart, but like I was so much more concerned about that before we started working together. And then after we started working together, I was like, she's willing to challenge me. She's warm and compassionate, but also tough when she needs to be. She gets what I'm saying, and she doesn't take any shit from me. Like, okay, that will do. That is enough.
I have a question for you.
Hmm.
How much do you still mask in your therapy? So
Mm,
masking being like for people who don't understand the term, like basically giving an aura of what you want them to see versus what you actually are doing at the time.
I don't think I do it really anymore, or not do it, or,
Did
or
did
if
you
I
do it
do,
before?
I think so. Yeah, 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 for sure. Like when I came in, I was just like, like I need to, like I kind of need my therapist to fancy me, and that's how I will win at therapy. Really? I honestly think that was a little part of it. Like, I think
It's
it's a
so
part of it for a lot of people.
adorable. So
But
adorable.
I was just like, I need to win. I need to be a good boy at therapy. Now, if I will occasionally catch myself doing it, or I will say to her, if you're, I will say, so what I'm thinking about now is, and just try and talk her through the process as it's happening. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a version of masking, but what I was doing more, I'd say, is just like reciting the narratives that I'd established in my mind. So I could
Correct.
tell her about this thing in my childhood, but really what I was telling her about is just like the very refined version of it that I've told myself over the years. And she was kind of like, no, we need to get into the story. I need to understand like how you felt at the time. So not too much anymore, but I think everyone does it sometimes, in bits and pieces, and you just have to try and catch yourself, right?
It's almost impossible not to. Like, you just will portray an image of yourself to people that you think is acceptable to them or that you want to
Yeah.
be able to portray. And the reality is you're paying this person to see as much of the real you as possible, and then to help, give you questions and potentially guidance on how to better understand that and how to become and uh embody the real you. Like,
Hmm.
that's what you're trying to do. How do I be the embodiment of more of the things that I want to do? And plenty of people, like with therapy, I think the challenging bit is like they focus so much on the negatives, and we get focused on the negatives. Your brain gets focused on the negatives. But the reality is the better ways to go through life are like, what are the positives? What are the things you're working towards? How do you give yourself like, consistent, achievable things every single day to like help yourself build that better life or to help yourself be more the embodiment of that? Did I today act like the things that I say that I want to act like? If I didn't, I'm disappointed in that. All right, well, how do I help repair that? And so many times, like, repair is like a big challenge too. Like, you need to get to a spot where I can have hard conversations with somebody. I can do it in a timely manner, and I then am able to continue on and hopefully build things that are better, because trust builds through repetition. It builds through
Hmm.
comfort. It
Hmm.
builds through challenge, right? Like, a trust fall is someone catching you when you would fall and hurt yourself. Building trust with somebody is part of the secrets to lifelong friendships, but lifelong loves as well. And you will be challenged. Like, everything in your life is going to be challenging at different times. If you're never challenged, like, you've never been tested. Sometimes you test and you act in a way that you're not proud of, and repair is the other half of that. And so you will constantly find yourself in little ways of repair and sometimes very big ways of repair in most things that you do in life, as long as you're willing to have those conversations and build things that are stronger. Plenty of people run away from that though, and that's why they
Hmm.
don't have those types of relationships.
What else do you think that we should cover before we wrap this up?
Therapy ties back in with hard conversations too, because a lot of what therapy does is helps you have hard conversations with yourself
Hmm.
that then are springboards to hard conversations with other people. And when we say hard conversations, like I was just talking about in the repair space, it sounds scary. It sounds like, oh, like I don't know if I want to have
Hmm.
these things. I'm anxious about it. I'm nervous about it. But the reality is they are going to happen anyway. And in many cases, they're not what we build them up to be. They're not nearly as scary. The person on the other side of it, if they're willing to like have empathy towards you or love you and want to sort of work through stuff, these hard conversations often are like ways to better understand each other. And who doesn't want to be better understood?
Hmm.
So therapy ties into hard conversations, and it also ties into conversation debt, which is the other side of it. So like when things build up and they linger for a really long time, sometimes they become part of your identity. And the way I was thinking about it before this episode was, like, we often run into the Reddit people, and I've got this long of a marriage and these things happened, and now, like, we had to split up for whatever. Sometimes something will happen and you just leave it sit there for like years at a time. And if
Hmm.
you had addressed it pretty early on, if you've been able to sort of gently move it along, if you're able to set a boundary and call up your partner on it at some point, then it doesn't have to fester into resentment. It doesn't have to turn into contempt. And if you leave it though, then that builds and builds and builds. And sometimes that debt ends up being foreclosed on because you can no longer repair it. You can no longer fix what went wrong before. Therapy is a way to, as we talked about initially, hey, give me a diagnostic around myself. And I want to talk about things. I want to figure stuff out more about myself so that I can walk through the world in a better way and interact with people in a way that I'm proud of consistently. By
Hmm.
having another source of diagnostic, which is often your therapy, like it really does improve your potential relationships with the world as long as you're willing to do the extra work.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I completely agree with this idea that hard conversation sounds like something that's going to be miserable and unrewarding. And actually, when you do this stuff in therapy, you have this other person there, which is, we say a lot in therapy that the relationship is the therapy, like the therapeutic alliance, it's called, between the client and therapist. And it's it's wonderful to know that somebody can hear the worst things about you and doesn't think that you're like an unsalvageable person, or that they will hear the really good stuff about you, but they will look past it and see the rest. They'll be able to accept you, that they'll listen to everything that you have to say, and they won't be, looking for their turn to speak or their time to get out of the conversation. Like, those things are so valuable, and it all contributes to having, as we talked about in the self-worth episode, something about you that is immovable, something about you that is unshakable. And that will make you so much less resentful and so much less fearful, I think, as you go through life, because you know who you are and you know what you stand for, you know what your values are. If you have all those things, there's only so much someone can hurt you. In my experience, you're more resilient.
My therapist and me had to rebuild myself, like
Hmm.
because I came out of selling my business. I was divorced or divorcing. I then had this relationship that I thought was my next step. I was also building a new business, which is the transfer flow, and I was really unmoored. And to some extent, I'm still a little unmoored. And she's been helping me see that like I'm a good person. I am worthy of love, as we all are. You are all worthy of love. And we're not like the touchy feely podcasts here. Like we often do funny and ridiculous shit, and just wait till the next one. But you are worthy of love, and sometimes that can be challenging when you're in like your hardest times, and sometimes it's challenging when you lose the people around you that saw you best. And
Hmm.
it's totally, totally, totally okay to ask for help. Your friends like to help you in general. Your family, if you have relationships, also likes to help you. But your therapist is there to teach you that you'll survive and you're worthy of love, and you'll find other people even when those are gone.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think we've covered it. I think, if if nothing else, this will get me lots of client requests. Like, that's the main thing that we're doing with this podcast.
That's that. Yeah, this whole thing was just like one giant referral funnel for Patrick, who's already oversubscribed. But
Guerrilla marketing. That's what it is. Or
that's what I
maybe
do.
we just give people bad advice so that their, as you say, so their lives will go off the rails, and then more money for me. Like, that's the important thing.
Sometimes it is your fault. If you walk through life and every single morning and afternoon you meet an asshole, like you're probably the asshole. But plenty of other
Hmm.
times, like it's useful to have somebody say, that person was probably over the line, and you're okay. Like it's all right.
And it's all right to be an asshole sometimes. Everyone's an
But yeah,
asshole sometimes.
it's totally
Like,
fine.
are you living? Like, then you're sometimes going to be a dick.
Are you an American? Sometimes when you open your mouth, it just these things come out because that's what we've been culturally coached to do.
Yeah, I mean, when I've done therapy with Americans, I do just say to them, "This is a lost cause. Put the
Except
price,
for this entire podcast, you asshole. Ha.
double the price." And no, I don't think this will work out.
They're rich enough; they can often pay double the price. So,
Well, they have. They also, I think, have this perception that like therapy is going to be much more expensive because it is much more expensive in the US, right?
yeah.
Like, that's the other thing. If you're in the UK, by the way, therapy is extremely affordable. Like, it's still expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, but you're likely to be looking at kind of like 40 to 80 quid an hour or something. Whereas like
Not
$200,
200 in New
$300,
York
yeah.
City.
Like, very, very common stuff. Admittedly, in that case, you might get a psychiatrist who can prescribe. So if that's something that you want, then maybe that's something that will cost you more. But therapy is quite affordable. And actually, also, if you're thinking about therapy but wondering about affording it, there are services that provide it free in the UK, but you can also get in touch with some therapists because they will have a sliding scale. So if you're low income, they might be able to give you cheap sessions or pro bono sessions. So it's at the very least worth asking.
Yeah, and if people are looking for a therapist, like where are the first places to start?
In the UK, counselling directory is really good, and Psychology Today has a directory as well. Look for people who are members of one of the major boards. So this is the CPCAB, like the BPS, the BACP, which I'm a member of. These are just like accrediting boards which have ethical frameworks that the therapist has to subscribe to, and it just means that you get a little bit of peace of mind about the kind of training they've been through, and that if anything goes wrong, you've got someone to talk to. But yeah, those are the main places to look.
Yeah, and test out a couple, see if you can find the right one. Like many of my different friends, like didn't like the first couple. I was like, guys, just keep going because you will get there. And if you've bothered to do the start, you might as well see if you can find somebody you like talking to because it's worth it. It's not scary. It will help you, and I have found it incredibly rewarding. I
Mm.
probably should have done it much earlier in my life.
Me too, man.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody. We appreciate your time and tell everybody that you love us and that they should also listen to.
Thank
Say
you very
goodbye,
much.
Patrick.